So just a quick introduction, and to those of you who have just joined, we've seen a few more participants have joined since our initial introduction. Today's webinar is being hosted in collaboration with Lewisham Council, and we will be focusing on how to employ overseas workers with a particular focus on the sponsor license application front and the management of a sponsor license once granted. My name is Papi Kabir. I am a paralegal here at Woodcock Law Limited. I am a sponsor license specialist here. I have been working in this field for quite some time now, and I have been liaising with clients on live cases and also repeat clients that are wishing to look into additional sponsor licenses for their businesses. So my contact details are on the screen. If you would like to book a consultation with me, do get in touch.
And hi everyone, my name is Roshni. I'm also a paralegal working alongside Papia, and I do specialise more on the skilled worker visa front, which is something we will discuss as we get through the next few webinar slides, and it is the process thereafter the sponsor licence application.
Our contact details are shown on the screen, so if you do want to jot them down now, feel free to do so. If not, we will be sharing this at the end of the presentation. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a WhatsApp message or a normal text message. Or alternatively, if you prefer email, our emails are also active. So do get in touch. We look forward to hearing from a lot of you quite soon.
Okay, so just a little bit about what we do before we begin here at Woodcock Law and Notary Public. So we do offer immigration services both to business and personal immigration law, and we are also a notarial firm. So we offer notarial services as well as legalisation and apostille services. We do also offer visa and consular services, and we offer ITIN services. So as you can see from the screen, we are authorised by the IRS to assist with ITIN applications, and Papia over here is also an IRS agent. So if you do have any ITIN inquiries, please do let us know. We would be more than happy to assist you.
Okay, so we are going to start the main part of this webinar today. So if you did have any inquiries about any other services that we do offer, as mentioned by Roshni, do get in contact. If not, then I'm sure a lot of you have signed up today to learn a bit more about sponsor licenses. This webinar is an introductory webinar to the sponsor license route. So whether it is that you've done a little bit of research, but you want a bit more clarification and the support from immigration professionals, then do get in touch with us. If not, this will be an introductory session, which again can be followed up with a consultation if you do wish to proceed and have a further discussion about this and to figure out if it is the right fit for your business. So firstly, what is a sponsor license? So a sponsor license is a license given by the Home Office to UK businesses who will have then a license to sponsor and hire any migrant workers. So a sponsor license is valid for a period of 4 years once granted. The main aim is to first initially get a sponsor license in place. So usually this is for UK businesses that are already registered on Companies House. As part of the initial screening service, we do make sure that you are on Companies House, just so that we can see that you have been trading in the UK and it is a UK business. Just so you are aware, sponsor licenses are exclusively for UK companies. We have had inquiries from all over the UK and also the world where individuals are looking to obtain a sponsor license. But just to reiterate, sponsor licenses are only for UK-based companies. And again, a formal analysis and a full assessment can be made on a case-by-case basis. Sponsor license applications are considered by UKVI, also known as a Home Office. So once an application is submitted, it is then reviewed by caseworkers here in the United Kingdom and led by the Home Office to assess the eligibility. And once you are granted by the sponsor license, you then work very closely with the Home Office to make sure that you can sustain and maintain that license that you've been given for a period of 4 years. Within that period, if your license is revoked or there are issues with compliance, it is another area that we can assist with. So, you know, if you are an existing sponsor license holder or you are looking to obtain a sponsor license, then do get in contact with us so we can answer any questions that you might have and tailor our services to the needs that you and your business require.
So just a little bit about what you can do once your sponsor license has been granted. So once this has been granted, you will be given access to the sponsorship management system, also known as SMS, and you will be able to use this particular portal to assign certificates of sponsorships to the individuals you wish to hire, namely migrant workers. And within this, so the individual that can assign the certificate of sponsorship will need to be an authorising officer, which is something that you will go through once you're applying for a sponsor license. You will authorize authorise someone, mainly a senior individual of the company, to manage the SMS system, and they will be able to assign the certificate of sponsorship to the designated individual. You will also have access to other features of the SMS system, which is crucial for maintaining your sponsor license. But again, that is something that we will go through as the slides progress. So with regards to the certificates of sponsorship that I just discussed, there are two types of certificates of sponsorship that you can assign to an individual, that being a defined and that being an undefined certificate of sponsorship. So the main difference between these are that a defined certificate of sponsorship refers to individuals that are making applications out of the country, and an undefined certificate of sponsorship refers to individuals who are applying within the UK. So if that's them switching over from a skilled worker visa that they're already on with another company, or whether they are, renewing their visa within the UK, or switching over from the student visa, which is something we see quite often. And in that particular situation, you will assign them a certificate of sponsorship, not a defined certificate of sponsorship, because again, they are within the country.
So adding on to what Roshni has mentioned about certificates of sponsorship, when you do a draft of a certificate or you are submitting this to the Home Office, there is a part of the certificate of sponsorship, whether that's undefined or defined, that requires you to detail exactly what the migrant will be doing. So that is a job description. Along with that is the salary and also the hours workable for the migrant. So this is a process that we like to call SOC code mapping, just because when you do the job description, you have to align it to a SOC code. The SOC code stands for the Standard Occupational Classification. It's typically a 4-digit number that does correspond to a job. So for example, the most common ones that we do see are ones like 2134 that you can see on the screen, or 7120 if it's more of a sales assistance role, or one within a shopkeeping facility. But again, we do come across quite a few variations of SOC codes. What the team then does as part of the SOC code mapping process, and it is something that we offer as part of our bespoke end-to-end service here at Woodcock Law, is we carry out the SOC code mapping process to you. So I've had several clients that have called in wishing to obtain a sponsor license because they have, for example, the role as a butcher vacant in their company, and they need that role to be fulfilled that hasn't been fulfilled by the UK labour market. So what we then do is, whether or not they have a job description already drafted or they just know what the vacant position is, we then take that away, and a member of our legal team then goes through the codes of practice and codes of conduct with the Home Office to obtain and draft a certificate of sponsorship, and more importantly, the job description that aligns to what the prospective migrant would be doing in the United Kingdom. So whether you have a job description already drafted or you just know the vacant positions that you currently have within the company, our team then carries out the full SOC code mapping process to make sure that that job description and the SOC code assigned is the correct one, and it is the most accurate and appropriate one. We have seen, me and Roshni both, in several occasions where individuals have submitted visa applications without legal assistance, or they've put through a sponsor license application where SOC code mapping hasn't been done correctly and the wrong 4-digit number has been assigned to, for example, a butcher or a hairdresser. And this does get flagged up by the Home Office because they need to make sure that you understand, as a sponsor, the job role that you are offering to migrant workers, and to just make sure that you are being compliant in all aspects. As part of the SOC code mapping process, we do also advise on salary in line with Appendix Skilled Worker and Appendix Shortage Occupation, to make sure that you are paying the migrant worker the correct salary as per Home Office guidelines. This is very, very important, because once you are granted a sponsor license and you are looking to sponsor any migrants, you need to be paying them the correct salary. Anything that's underpaid will get flagged up by the Home Office, and they will reject the application based on the fact that the salary hasn't been met, and the salary threshold based on the tradable points in Appendix Shortage Occupation or Appendix Skilled Worker have not been satisfied. So again, this is where the team comes in to advise you appropriately, and also to work with anyone who's in HR that might be assisting with this. The final thing that I do want to flag up as part of our SOC code mapping process, and to eliminate any potential risks with the application for the visas, we do also advise on the hourly workable hours per week. So typically the Home Office has a baseline of 37.5 hours per week, but we have had instances where individuals like to hire individuals which is for 40 hours or 39. So what the team likes to do is we carry out a pro rata mapping process where we can then advise on the appropriate salary that you need for the level of work that you require that migrant to do. So again, can't stress enough how important SOC code mapping is, and to make sure that you go through the correct realms of SOC code mapping with a member of our legal team to make sure that there are no issues with either your sponsor license or the potential skilled worker applications that you do subsequently.
Okay, so something you would have heard me make reference to earlier in the slides is the authorising officer. So essentially, this is an individual that you will need to assign to delegate and manage the sponsorship management system. There is some eligibility criteria for the authorising officer, and something that we do tend to flag up to all individuals who inquire about the sponsorship visa. So one thing we do recommend is ensuring that they are a British citizen or they are settled within the UK and they do not have a criminal background and they are of a senior level within that company, because anyone that isn't, or anyone that does have a criminal background, it does tend to get flagged up by the Home Office. We have seen this happen previously, and it does cause complications with using the SMS system thereafter. If you are interested in becoming an authorising officer for your company, if you already have a sponsor license and you want to know a little bit more about assigning an authorising officer to the company, we really would recommend, contacting us for further information on this. It's not one rule, one overall rule. I wouldn't say it's, if you have a criminal background, but you have, let's say, a driving offence, it wouldn't be essentially that you wouldn't be able to be an authorising officer as such, but this would need to be screened through our initial consultations that we do offer. So again, if this is something that you are interested in or something you want to know a little bit more about, I would recommend calling in to see how we can assist with that. So with regards to the sponsorship management system and what you would need this for, so as I mentioned, this is the main tool that you will use essentially to monitor the individual that you have hired, their employment with the company. And this is extremely important because you do need to ensure you're being compliant with the Home Office rules and regulations. And if you're not keeping up to date with, their employment, it is something that the Home Office will flag and, they will take action against. So again, it is really, really important that you stay up to date with this. So just with regards to some of the key features of the sponsorship management system, again, you'll be able to assign and renew certificates of sponsorship, which you will likely do every 3 to 5 years, depending on the length of the individual's current visa. You'll be able to use this to manage key personnel, so you can assign level 1 users. We have seen individuals use their immigration advisors as level 1 users, which is recommended because then they can ensure that you are being compliant with the law, and they can ensure that you are using the SMS system correctly. You can use this to report changes of circumstances, so whether this be a change of work location or a change of salary, that does need to be updated and reflected on the SMS system. And again, you can use this to upgrade and renew your sponsor license, which is something you will need to do every 4 years, because that is how long a sponsor license is valid for.
Okay, we're now going to move on to the second section of this webinar, which focuses more so on the sponsor license application process. As you know, the main focus of this webinar is to focus on the sponsor license. Just a quick note, if you are interested in anything that we've mentioned so far, especially about the skilled worker visas, please do get in touch as we can elaborate on this and go through your current situation with you in greater detail. But as this webinar is focused on the sponsor licenses, this section will be relating to that. So do let us know if you have any questions towards the end when we do host our Q&A session. So as mentioned right at the start, we are offering any participants of this webinar a free 30-minute consultation where we do conduct our initial screening calls with a member of our legal team. So during these initial screening calls and prior to taking the call, what we do often recommend is that you get in touch with us and either give us the full name as registered on Companies House for the company you're looking to obtain a sponsor license for, or a company house registration number. Either one will do, just so that we can do a check through on our end to see things like incorporation date, whether or not your filing history is up to date, and also your registered address and the people that are noted on your directorship. So it is always important that we get those details. As I mentioned, a sponsor license application can only be made by a UK company, so we always make sure that you are on Companies House and those documents are readily available to us. As part of the initial screening stage, we do go through supporting documentation, which I will go into in the next slide and in a little bit. So in the initial screening, we do tend to go through all the supporting documentation just to get a brief overview of what documents you currently have and what's outstanding, just so that we can build up a portfolio and a profile of the company as it stands, and put together an action plan of what we would need to do to ensure that you would be ready to do a sponsor license application and for it to have the utmost chance of success when putting that through. So as part of that, we would ask for your HMRC filings. I typically ask whether or not you have an accountant assisting. If not, we are able to get you in touch with any accountants or any third parties that we see feasible that might assist with the process. One of the key things that I do like to ask you in the initial screening and to help build up the portfolio and profile of the business is your current employee structure. This is a good way to identify whether you're an SME or a medium to large size enterprise, just because that will again affect things like fees with the Home Office and also the documents that we would need to provide. That again goes hand in hand of whether or not you're a startup, so incorporated within the last 18 months, or whether you have been a long-standing registered client. So it is something that we do tend to look at. In terms of employee breakdown and the certificate of sponsorship, we do also ask whether or not you already have had discussions internally with any vacant positions for the company, and we do tend to ask how many skilled workers you would like to have at that current stage, just because these things are very important to have for the initial conversation, and so we can map out our long-term plan for you and the company and also the migrants that you wish to bring over. So moving on to the supporting documentation, with the Home Office and the application, the way that we typically like to process the application from the point of engagement is step one would be the screening call. After we have agreed on onboarding and onboarding documents have been signed and checked over by our internal teams, we then start the process of drafting the visa application form, if that is something that you want to start at the same time, but most importantly, drafting the sponsor license application form. And during that time, we parallel this with creating all your supporting documentation. The Home Office rules are currently that you need a minimum of 4, but here at Woodcock Law, and to ensure that the application has the best chance of success, we always aim to provide as many as we can, and typically around the 5 to 6 mark would be slightly better, just in case one of your documents aren't suitable, you've got others to fall back on. As we obtain all the documentation and the relevant information needed for the sponsor license, we then go through a vetting process internally with the principal solicitor, Nathan Woodcock, to certify the documentation in line with Appendix A of the Home Office guidelines for a sponsor license application, to make sure that documentation and that piece of evidence is and will count towards documentation that you provide for your sponsor license. Once we are in a position that all the documents are in place, we then look to submit. So for documentation, this again is gone through in the initial screening call, and then once we start the process, we then go in to further depth about each and every one of these documents, especially if we've already made that initial list in the contact that we have during the screening call. We can then go through and work with you, especially your HR departments, to make sure that we've got these documents in place. So the first one is the employer's liability insurance, a certificate for at least 5 million. Typically when I've had clients call in, they aren't aware that they need this. This is something that I would recommend if you don't have this in place. It is pretty easy to get that sorted out. Just a disclaimer, we are not insurance brokers, so we can't advise you in that aspect, but we can advise you on what to look out for from an immigration point of view. So for example, making sure your insurance cover covers at least 5 million. Once you have got your employer's liability insurance cover sorted, we then ask for proof of this. So that's through the certificate, confirming that it is cover for at least 5 million, and that again counts towards one documentation. The second one is a current financial report or audited annual report. Typically, and based on my experience, a lot of the clients that I do deal with on a day-to-day basis are companies that aren't audited yet. That's not an issue at all. If you are audited, brilliant. We can use that as part of our supported documentation. In the event you're not audited because you haven't met that threshold, we will work with your accountant to obtain your unaudited report and use this as part of documentation. But again, this won't be ticked on your actual application, but we will provide that as supplementary evidence for the caseworker to review. What we like to say is the more documents we can provide, the better it is for the application. Moving on to other documents, so HMRC, payee, and BAP. So these are counted as two separate documents. And again, we can liaise with your accountant if you do need that extra support and you need assistance with getting these documents together. So HMRC payee is something we advise all clients to obtain, just because if you are getting a sponsor license, you'll then be sponsoring a migrant who needs to be put onto payroll. And in order to do payroll, you need to have payee active. So if at the point of our initial call, you don't have that set up, we always advise you get the ball rolling on that. Similarly, I've had various situations where companies have been incorporated for several years, and along the way, they've just lost paperwork. And usually, I'm not sure why it is, but payee paperwork seems to go missing. So we always recommend that your accountant gets in touch with HMRC and obtains that paperwork, just so that we've got that on record. Again, if you don't meet the threshold for that and your accountant has advised you're not ready for that, we can have that conversation with them from an immigration point of view. And if you can provide it, brilliant, we can add it. If not, then that is something that we will have that discussion about. CT 600 and CT 603 count as one item. So even though if you have both documents, perfect, that counts as one unit of documentation. If you have one or the other, then that will be not eligible for counting as documentation. So we can adjust that in the supporting documentation that we have and supporting cover letter. Again, for business bank statements, especially if you are a startup and established in the last 18 months, we will need to check that your business banking is on the FCA list and it's also with the Bank of England's Prudential Authority list, just because that is a Home Office requirement. So as part of the screening call, we always ask, who do you bank with? Because we need to check that you have met those requirements. As part of the application, we do ask for the last 3 months of business bank statements, and if you are a startup, a bank letter confirming the dealings your bank has had with you and the nature of these dealings. So the next document that we would require, and this is one that we always recommend that you do have as part of your initial 4, is proof of ownership. This is either through land registry documents or a leasehold for the property that you are currently occupying. We are aware that a lot of companies have a registered address and trading address on Companies House and a different operational address. If you are in that situation, please do get in touch so that we can discuss this further, as there may be additional documents you need to provide to support this. The final 2, so governing body registration, this is applicable mainly for those who have joined that come from a food catering industry or are a accountant, for example. So if you're in the food industry, food standard agency certificates are a must, and you usually have these already, so we'll obtain that. Again, if you're accountancy firms, if you're ACCA qualified or registered, again, we ask for these documentations because it's another documentation that you can provide in support of your application. The last document, which isn't mandatory but we require for the application process, is a company hierarchy chart outlining who's in the company and what vacancies you have. So again, there are 8 pieces of information on the board right now. The minimum is 4, but we always recommend 5 to 6. If you have any questions about documentation or any concerns, do get in touch so we can go through this. So moving on to the application processing time. Once you have had all the documentation certified by Nathan Woodcock, our principal solicitor, and we are at a position where we can submit, we will then book in a Teams call or an online meeting or a face-to-face meeting if you are based in one of our flagship stores across the UK. We will then book you in for a submission meeting so that we can submit to the Home Office. Once the application has been submitted, there are 1 of 3 things that can happen. So firstly, we will submit, and if you're going via the standard route, a decision will be made within 8 standard weeks, and typically is in week 7 and week 8 that we get an outcome. If you are looking to get a priority service request put in, this does take 10 days, and there is an additional cost for this. So if you are interested, please do get in touch with myself or Roshni so we can advise on current timelines in line with the Home Office. So that's the first thing that can happen. Second thing is, by week 7, if the Home Office aren't satisfied with the application as it's been submitted, they may request for further information regarding the company's background and profile, and in particular the HR systems. If you are flagged up for a further information request, our team are on hand to assist you with this, and hopefully by the end of that period, the Home Office can make a judgment. In the event they look to ask for more details or they need more information from you, they may wish to come to your place of work where you have noted in the sponsor license and carry out an audit. This can be unannounced or it can be planned. In either event, do get in touch with the team. We are here and we do offer a mock audit trial with our principal solicitor to prep you in the best way possible for this. So again, 3 things can happen. Our aim will always be to just get that grant for you, and in the event of a application refusal, then we will again book in a meeting with you to discuss what has happened. Thankfully at Woodcock Law, we haven't had any refusals based on our own submissions. We have had clients come to us with previous refusals, and we've been able to turn that around for them and make sure that the application is in the best possible state that it can be for that submission to go ahead of the Home Office to approve it.
Okay, so something that I'm sure everyone is keen on knowing is the Home Office fees. So what's involved with both the sponsor licence application and the skilled worker visa thereafter. So you'll all be happy to know there's only one fee for the sponsor licence application that you would need to pay. So this does depend on the size of your firm and your company. So for smaller or charitable sponsors, it is £536 for the application fee. So this is companies with 50 employees or less. And then for medium or large sponsors, so that being 50 employees or more, that will be £1,476. So again, the price just varies depending on the size of your organisation or company. So going forward and based on the skilled worker application and what's required, you would need to pay a certificate of sponsorship assignment fee, and that is £199. So that is regardless of whether you're making an in-country or out-of-country application, it will just be £199 to assign that fee. To assign that certificate of sponsorship. So the skilled worker application fee based on a 3-year visa is £625 if you are applying from outside of the UK and £704 if you're applying from within the UK. Another fee that you will need to pay as part of this application cycle is the immigration skills charge. So this is something that you'll pay at the point of assigning the certificate of sponsorship. So before you actually make the main application payment, this is what you will need to pay, and it's £364 per year, £1,092 for 3 years. Thereafter, you will need to pay the immigration health surcharge. So that is £624 currently per year and £1,872 for 3 years. But something that we have seen recently, and something that I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of, is that the Home Office have announced an increase in these fees. So the immigration health surcharge from the current guidance that we have seen on our end and that has been announced is that the immigration health surcharge fees, they will be increasing to £1,035 per year. So quite a significant increase, and something that we would just like everyone to be aware of from this stage on. It's not been announced when this will happen, but it is in place and it is something that will be happening in the very near future. Just something to keep in mind on your end.
In addition to the Home Office fees, we also have our professional fees here at Woodcock Law. We do believe that every case should be based and assessed on its own merit. So we don't have a typical fee structure. And again, this is open to negotiation and also to tailor to the company's needs. But typically for our popular bundle of a skilled worker application and a sponsor license application, we currently do charge £6,500 for this application bundle. But again, if you are looking for a tailored quote, you have either more skilled workers that you need to obtain, or you have a different inquiry relating to the sponsor license application, do get in contact with us for a tailored quote. So moving on to case studies, we will be discussing a case study of what we've been doing in our roles as a paralegal here at Woodcock Law. So we do typically, as you can see on the screen, we work with a various number of companies and institutions. If you do see any on the screen that you can, you can see yourself either owning a company or you do have a similar background, do get in touch, because again, we do have expertise and experience in these fields. So I think I'll start off with my one, Rosh. So the first one is the halal butchers. So I am a Muslim and I have managed to get in touch with a lot of butchers around the UK who are in a position where they are also Muslim butchers who have a specific need for bringing over migrants that are aware of the halal requirements in line with the Sharia law and things that they need to do to accommodate to the Muslim community in their local area. So I was contacted about 3 years ago by halal butchers up in the north of the country who needed 25 skilled workers to come over and to assist in their warehouse. They have a massive industrial warehouse where they do have several butchers operating to produce halal meat on a day-to-day basis. So when they got in contact with me, they wanted to bring over individuals from Pakistan predominantly to come and work for their warehouse in the upper north of the country. And once they did get in contact with me, they were quite shocked to know that they needed a sponsor license to be able to sponsor these migrants. So on the call, we went through what documents they already had, what documents they still needed to obtain. We established that they already had an accountant who I then got in touch with, and I was able to touch base on the documents that we needed shortly after. And to be fair, they already had documents. They just didn't know that they needed a sponsor license. Once we established all the documentation and we were ready to submit, we then submitted that documentation to the Home Office. They have been granted their sponsor license. For the past 3 years, we've been assisting them with bringing over their skilled workers from various countries, as I said, predominantly Pakistan, to fulfill those roles as a butcher. Currently, we are on our 36th case with them of bringing over skilled workers, and it seems to be a growing trend where there is a need for halal butchers in the United Kingdom, and it's something that a lot of individuals, especially in the butcher industry, don't realize they need a sponsor license for. I think they had the assumption that they could just hire migrants over and bring them over, but again, we reiterated the importance of compliance and also the Home Office and making sure you're not putting yourself in a position where you could be penalized for this. So making sure that you do have an active sponsor license and that you are going about the process in the correct way. So one of my key cases has been and will continue to be the halal butchers that we have in and around the UK. And again, it is one that we are still in contact with to this very day.
So continuing on from what Papia has just mentioned, so the sector that I am going to mention and an application that we worked on that is slightly different to yours, Papia, is the beautician sector. So what happened with this particular organisation is that we had submitted a sponsor licence application and they were then audited. So the Home Office did email them requesting an audit of their company, and this particular company, they weren't aware of what to expect. You know, naturally, they didn't have the background as to what was expected of them, what was going to be asked, you know, what kind of questions they were going to be thrown, and what they would need to prepare on their end. So they did ask us to assist with this section of the sponsor license application, even though it had been submitted. So what we did in this particular scenario was we assisted them with the kind of questions that were going to be asked. We prepared them with all the information that they would need to provide and all the documentation they would need to provide, and we did ensure that they have a HR system in place, which is ideally what the Home Office was looking at. We can confirm that this particular organisation was granted their sponsor license, and ever since then they have been hiring individuals from abroad, and the organisation has grown rapidly, which is obviously exactly what we wanted for them. So yeah, that's one of the sectors that we did work on, slightly different to the one that Papia worked on, as I mentioned, but it is one that we did do, and it was one that was slightly different to the norm, and slightly different to what we normally assist with. But it was one that we assisted with, and it went, you know, very well.
One thing I do want to mention at this stage, whilst we have been speaking about the skilled worker aspect of a sponsor license, I do want to make you aware when you are making a sponsor license application, there are other routes that you can select. It's not exclusive to the skilled worker route. So as you can see on the screen, we have worked with churches, mosques and synagogues around the UK. Typically, these applications are still sponsor licenses, but the route that we've been selected is a Minister of Religion route. So although we have a whole webinar on the skilled worker and sponsor license route, please do be aware that if you are in a faith background and you are looking to obtain a sponsor license for your church or a mosque or whatever it may be that you are looking to do get in contact with us, because the sponsor license route does have various options available on various routes. One of our key ones that we do work on and we are quite proud to collaborate on is with a lot of the churches around the UK. We do help and assist with bringing over pastors from all around the UK to offer and spread their knowledge in the UK on a Minister of Religion Tier 2 visa. So I did just want to flag that up, that as well as us talking about the skilled worker, we can also offer support to other routes that are available or that you might be interested in. So if you have any questions about the sponsor license process, both from a skilled worker perspective, a Minister of Religion, or another route that you might be interested in, do get in touch, as it is something that we are well adversed in and can advise on. myself and Roshni have worked on several cases whilst being here, and a lot of them, as you can see, we have had quite a variety of applicants that have come through our doors, and that are still active and are looking to bring over more individuals. The great thing about having a sponsor license is that once it is in place and you have regularized your numbers of employees and you are aware of your functions and your capabilities as a sponsor, you do then have that flexibility to bring over more migrants and to keep building your company. So I'm sure Roshni can agree, a lot of these companies that we first were introduced to, or they reached out to us, they were initially startups. Some of our companies that we partner with have now grown to have about 4 or 5 different establishments across the UK, and their turnover has just increased rapidly just because they have the additional help. A lot of the clients that do reach out to us are in that situation where they are a startup, they're looking to expand, but they just don't have the right sort of support system in place. And with the UK labour market, it can be very difficult to navigate because you need that reliable staff member. So I'm sure it is something that if you've joined this webinar, you are currently facing and you're experiencing. So if it sounds something similar to that and you do want to get in touch and see what your options are, as I said, we are offering a free webinar discount to those that have joined, and that free quotation will lead you to a consultation that you do get with one of our team members in the law team. So again, if you do recognise or can resonate with any of the case study examples that we've got on the screen, do get in touch so that we can discuss your case further. Just a quick top tip section. So as I said, me and Roshni have been in this industry for quite some time, and along the way we picked up a few tips and tricks that we wanted to share with yourselves that have joined us on our webinar today. So I'll just quickly run through this before we move on to our question and answer session today. So for our top tips, the main one that I have stressed throughout this webinar is supporting documentation. I cannot stress this enough. The documentation that you provide and that is validated and certified by our principal solicitor, Nathan Woodcock, is very important, because the more documents that you can provide that meets the criteria of Appendix A of the sponsor guidance notes with the Home Office, the more better it is for your application that we submit. So we always recommend hit the 5 to 6 as opposed to the minimum of 4. In addition to that, for the VAT requirement, if your company is able to register for VAT and you've had that conversation with your accountant, or we've spoken to your accountant and liaise on your behalf, we would recommend the company does get registered, just because it is another credible piece of evidence that you can provide as part of your application and portfolio. Again, as Roshni mentioned, the authorising officer is a key component to the sponsor license application. As part of the drafting, we do request details for the authorising officer. So it is something that we do make sure that you have in place, and that they are typically a UK passport holder or a British citizen, just because it does streamline the process. And where we can make the process easier, we will do so for you and your company. Again, Roshni's area of specialism, as we do also offer advice on employment law, is we have found a bridge in employment law and immigration and the HR system. So a few sponsor licenses in our time have been flagged up by the HR for HR systems by the Home Office. This is typically if you are a new startup, or what we have seen a growing trend is if you are in the food industry, they do like to do a check-in. This was more prominent during the COVID period, so just bear that in mind. Since the past year, we've had very minimal contact with the Home Office in terms of HR requests. But in the event that you have joined this webinar because you have been asked for a HR further information request, or you're looking to do a sponsor license and you're concerned about your HR system currently, feel free to speak to myself or Roshni about this so that we can answer any inquiries and put together a place and a system in place that meets the requirements of the Home Office. Lastly, or second to last, is registering with the relevant governing bodies. So again, if you do have a food establishment and you have things like the food hygiene certificate or the food standard agency certificate, make sure that's all updated. If you haven't already registered, do those registrations, because again, that's another good piece of documentation that we can add, and that does apply to your application. And finally, for any startups that have joined our call today, and if you have incorporated in the last 18 months, the Home Office do have another mandatory section about your business bank account. So you need to make sure that they are on the FCA and PRA list. And again, our teams internally can check this for you and advise if you do need to switch over banks for immigration purposes, and to make sure that your bank is correct in line with Appendix A. So those are a few top tips that we have on our end that we have collectively thought about and thought was worth sharing, just in case you are going through the process and had a few concerns. So we hope we have answered those in this webinar. So again, thank you for attending this webinar. We do hope that you found the webinar enjoyable and informative. That is the main takeaway point from this. Do stay tuned on our socials and on our website, www.woodcocklaw.co.uk, as we do regular webinars on various topics. As I said, my specialism, Roshni's specialism, is a sponsor licensed and skilled workers route. So that is why we have hosted this webinar today. But do keep an eye out on our website for any other webinars that are up and running. And again, if you are watching this as a recording, we hope you have enjoyed the recording. And again, do get in contact with us. Our contact information is on the screen. We will leave the slide up for the next few seconds just so that you can jot this down. But thank you very much for attending.
We do look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care.